Dobre, len krátko, pre tých, čo ste neboli na našom workshope. Úraz s elektrickým prúdom. Pre tých, čo ste neboli na workshope, tak vás vítam na tejto prednáške, ktorú organizuje Space Progress Bar. Dovoľte, aby som privítal ešte raz cteného hostia z ďalekej Ameriky, Mitchaltmana. Following presentation will be done in English, so if you have any issues, we can translate, but hopefully everybody understands. So if there are any questions and you maybe would like to translation as well, so just let us know and we can translate.
Yeah, I'll try to talk slowly and articulately, but if you have any problem, just yell and I'll hold off and someone can explain.
Okay.
So, use a mic?
No, just for camera.
Oh, for camera. It's on. Is that okay? Okay. So, yeah. Well, I've been going around the world doing workshops at various hackerspaces and hacker conferences for the last 3 years. I didn't intend to structure my life to do such a thing. Life has a way of presenting opportunities that you can ignore or take, and it just seemed like a cool idea. I started Hackerspace in San Francisco a little over 3 years ago, and back then there were about 50 hackerspaces in the world, most of them in Germany, and now there's several hundred all around the world, Progress Bar being one of the ones that's just started recently. But the thing is, this whole hackerspace movement is really new. Nobody knows what's happening here. It's just something that's very compelling. We need community. All of us need community. We wouldn't have survived on the planet as a species if we didn't evolve over 3 million years to get together and support each other in community. We wouldn't have survived as a species on the planet if we didn't get together in community and teach people how to use tools that we figured out how to make. Just because we're living now in the 21st century, 3 million years later, does not mean that we still don't have these inner needs that need expression in our modern lives. We need community, we need to make things, and what each of us can make is individual and unique to each one of us. So I'm a hardware hacker. I love teaching people how to make things with electronics. So my workshops have been going around, as I go around the world, I teach people how to make things with electronics. I have a few of my projects here. All of my projects are intended for teaching people who know nothing how to make something cool with electronics. And hopefully, and I have a wide array of different kind of projects. And I hope that for most people, there's at least one of them that is intriguing enough for a given person to try to make, even if they've never made anything ever before in their entire lives. And hopefully intriguing enough that people even who are experts might want to make it just because it's cool. But you know, I just make what I think is cool. And if other people think it's cool, then great. And if not, then you make something you think is cool. So it's just, that's how cool things happen on the planet. We all are unique individuals. Repeat after me. We're all unique individuals. Sorry about that. I love Monty Python. But yeah, so the talk that I have on my computer is one that I gave at a Chaos Congress 3 years ago. So hopefully I'll remember enough of it. But it's about the brain machine and about how I came up with that and how it fits in with my other projects. a lot's happened in those last 3 years. That Congress was only the second time that I gave a workshop teaching people how to solder. It started off with a table of 10 solder irons, and I had no idea what to expect. I just thought it'd be fun to teach people how to solder, and it was mobbed. So the next year I came back with 20 solder irons, and it was mobbed. And the next year, 40 solder irons, and it was mobbed. And this last year, we had a whole room full of solder irons with not just me, but many other people teaching people to solder and make all sorts of different projects. And the room was full, and there was a queue out the door of people wanting to come in and make things that they thought were cool. So this is part of the whole hackerspace movement and the whole hacker movement. We are getting together and showing the world how we make community, and also how we help and share and learn and teach with one another to make all of our lives better and the people's lives around us better. Progress Bar is just one example of a new hackerspace where people can get together and do not just hardware hacking like I do, but also software. And if it's anything at all like other hackerspaces like Noisebridge, there might even be cooking, sewing, art, craft, music, photography, video, whatever people are interested in, you can create a space to learn and teach and share whatever it is you're interested in. So let's see. I'll show you some of these blinky light things. Afterwards, there's plenty of free Noisebridge stickers and TV Be Gone propaganda and other stuff. Feel free to take it. Free stickers. Everyone likes stickers and blinky lights. So yeah, so if someone can push one of those buttons, let's see what it says. Yeah, so here's pictures of just some people at workshops from a few years ago. And as you can see, when people get together and learn, they're engaged. It's like little kids playing with blocks. It's fun, you know? It's just something that comes out in us, this playfulness that somehow we had it it goes away through school and through working at a cubicle at work or whatever. It's really important to have more of that in our lives. And so that's one of the reasons I love teaching people how to make things. How about the next button? And it was like that earlier today, too. If for the people who were here earlier, maybe they can relate to that. Here's a few projects that I made out of this. So I make things with microcontrollers. It just happens to be my thing, and I think they're way cool. They're very powerful tools with which we can make things that are totally cool and or useful. So this is a kit that's made by a kit maker in New York named Lady Ada. And she makes all sorts of amazing kits. She makes a living off of doing this. I make a living off of selling TV Be Gone. And anyone here not know what TV Be Gone is? It's a keychain that turns TVs off in public places. And it's important to turn TVs off everywhere, including public places, so that we can have our time, our consciousness, and our space to ourselves, so we can live a human existence and not just sit and drool in front of a piece of furniture. Of course, this is my opinion. So, but it is possible to make a living doing projects that you love, and there are many, many examples of people doing that. We don't have to be stuck in a job we don't like. We don't have to be stuck doing, you know, we can make choices. Sometimes it's scary to make those choices, but it's way worthwhile. Once you start making choices for yourself, as you see your life getting better, no matter where you are, your life can be just a little bit cooler. No matter who you are and where you are in your life can be just a little bit cooler. And if you do that over a period of a week or a month or a few years, if you continually do that, what will your life be like after that? And if a bunch of people start doing that, what will the world be like? So this is the kind of stuff I love pushing. So I am really happy to help people quit jobs that they don't like. So if you ever happen to find yourself in that position, my contact information is on the screen. I have it over there. Please email me, call me, whatever. I will poke you if you want me to quit your job that you don't like. Because no one deserves that. No one deserves to work in a job they don't like. We have a life. At some point, you are going to die. What are you going to do before then? It's totally up to you. So I want to encourage you to explore what you love. Turn off that fucking TV, make time and space in your life, and explore what you love, and you might be able to make a living doing what you love. Okay? So keep that in mind. So anyways, here's a kit made by a kit maker in New York, Lady Ada. This is called a mini POV. POV stands for persistence of vision. It allows us, it's just part of the way our vision system works. We see photons even after they've gone away. And hopefully that allows you to see what this says. Can you read it? Make! Because we need to make things. But it's a microcontroller. You can program it to say whatever you want it to say. All of my projects, just like Lady Ada's and many people at Hackerspaces, almost all, are open source, meaning all of the plans are online, very well documented, so you can download the plans and do whatever you want to do with it. You can make money with it, you can play with it, you can laugh at it, whatever you want to do with it. Plans are online, you can change it, alter it, do it as intended, whatever you like. I saw this kit, which is intended for total beginners to make successfully, even if they've never made anything before. And I thought that would be a really cool platform for altering into other cool projects that might intrigue people enough that they would try to make things even if they've never made anything before. The first thing that I did was make a brain machine, which is definitely my weirdest project. But I love it. I think it's totally wonderful, and maybe 90% of people who try it tend to agree. Some people do hate it, but you can try it. They're here. I'll explain it in the slides to follow. But let me tell you a bit about microcontrollers first. Microcontrollers are complete computers on a chip. How many people here are software geeks? A bunch. Any other hardware geeks here? Not very many. Well, hardware and software really aren't all that different. They both use the same part of our brains. But there's a few shifts in thought in order to understand microcontrollers. But one of the reasons I love microcontrollers is because it bridges the world of hardware and software. You have to have hardware, like little lights and buttons, but you have to program it in order for it to do anything. And the programming for microcontrollers is called firmware, because it's in between soft and hard. That's really the technical term. So with microcontroller projects, you start with basically the same hardware for almost every project. Just change it a little bit, change the firmware, which you can do through this programming port on this one, and you can end up with something like a little different or totally different. And a microcontroller is a complete computer on a little chip. That's what this is here. And like all computers, no matter how big or how small, all it does is fetch and execute instructions. That's all computers do from the moment you turn them on until the moment the power goes away. They fetch and execute instructions. Just for a microcontroller, everything is in the little chip, including the program. So the instructions it'll fetch and execute are inside of its program memory on the chip. And in this case, it's programmed to blink these lights in just such a way to let you see a message that we programmed in through the programming port. So let me tell you the brain machine first. So for people at the workshop earlier, I already went over this, but let me go over it again for people who weren't here earlier. You can see the hardware that's glued on to the side of the glasses is really the same as this, with some minor alterations. I took two of these lights and stuck them in the front of the glasses and glued them there so that they blink in front of your eyes. Like I said, this is my weirdest project. I took 2 of the lights and put them into this headphone jack. So rather than turning lights on and off, they're quickly pulsing speakers to make sound. And then instead of programming it through the programming port to display a message, I programmed it through the programming port to go through a sequence of meditation brainwave frequencies. And then it's brain machine. So if you're one of the 70% of people whose brains synchronize to external brainwave frequencies, your brain will synchronize to this really nice meditation sequence and you'll meditate. And it really does work for 70% of people. It's pretty amazing. And it's a really nice meditation. It's 14 minutes. It's really nice. But 100% of people hallucinate beautiful colors and patterns when they do this, which explains why it's one of Make Magazine's most popular projects. And 10,000 people have made this. That's a lot. It's way more successful than I ever imagined. My main intent for this was to get people to try to make things, and it was totally successful at that. And my secondary motive was to get people to, you know, sort of have a fun way to trick people into trying out meditation. Because I've benefited greatly from it. I've been meditating since I was 13 years old. And meditation is part of what allowed me to go through a process of becoming a totally depressed blob of a kid into a jet-setting, weird-haired inventor who loves my life. Without meditation, I don't know if I would have made it. When I was a little kid, being a geek back then was worse than it is now. Now it's almost kind of cool to be a geek because the world has seen the amazingly cool things that we're capable of making and have made and continue to make. And you know, and by the way, the world is still watching us as we're creating community and taking great notice. In all over the world, there's incredible positive press about hackers and hackerspaces. There was just a fantastic article in the San Francisco Chronicle about Noisebridge the day that I left for here. Yeah, so, but back when I was a kid, being a geek was not okay, especially an introverted geek like me. And I was totally afraid of people because people just meant someone who's going to beat me up. And more often than not, that's exactly what happened. I was beaten up almost every day in school. Gym class was total hell. Teachers and parents were of no help. So I retreated into television. I would watch television all day because everything on television was okay. Of course, that meant that I wasn't spending any time exploring what I loved. I was just watching this piece of furniture and drooling and escaping from my actual life and not learning how to effectively deal with people, not being healthy, eating junk food, becoming more of a target. So when I went back to school, I get beaten up more only to retreat into television again. This is called addiction. And I am a TV addict. Hello, my name is Mitch. I'm a TV addict. And, you know, but the thing is, everything that I thought was wrong with my life back when I was a little kid turned out to be what I love about my life now. I mean, I don't love that I'm a TV addict, but I made really good use out of that addiction. I make a living off of something that turns TVs off. And I've learned to effectively, to a certain extent, deal with other members of my species. Many of us geeks have learned to do that. Not necessarily at an developmentally optimal stage in our lives, but you know, we're all capable of doing that with just a little bit of intelligence and some creativity. And geez, inventing TV Be Gone really made it so that I was suddenly talking to a million people live on Fox TV because I invented something that turns TVs off. Isn't this a weird world? So, you know, and the thought, if someone a few years ago would have told me that I would be in front of a group of people, no matter who they are, even if they're other introverted geeks like me, talking in public, I would have run away screaming. It's too terrifying, but now I love it. I can say whatever I want and you're just listening to me. And laughing occasionally, which is nice. So, yeah, anyways, meditation was definitely part of my process of getting from where I was, which was not fun, to where I am now, which is wonderful. And I thought if I could trick people into trying it out, maybe others would benefit as well. So that's Brain Machine. And let me show you this one other thing too, that I also hacked out of Mini POV. You can see it's basically the same hardware, except instead of 8 red lights, I put in a red, a green, and a blue light. And then I programmed it with a method called pulse width modulation. It pulses these lights on and off and on and off so fast that we can't tell that they're blinking, again through POV, persistence of vision. But this case, I'm doing it to make it look like the lights are fading in and out at different rates. And that makes different intensities of red, green, and blue, and it goes through a 5-minute sequence of different intensities of red, green, and blue. And if you mix red, green, and blue together, you get lots of pretty colors. So you can see that there are other colors in there besides red, green, and blue. Every color that a computer monitor can make, because that's exactly how computer monitors get colors. There's thousands and thousands of little red, green, and blue dots at different brightnesses to get all the colors we get on a monitor. So from that I made this, which I just think is totally cool, which is why I made it. So this, you've seen this already, but it does exactly the same thing, except the red, the green, and blue light are inside of each one of these. And it goes red, green, and blue in the rest of the 5-minute sequence. But here you can easily see all the colors because they're close together and mixed together with these little drinking straws. But these also have an infrared emitter on each one, which can receive invisible light called infrared. And that's hooked to the microcontroller. So when infrared hits the detector, it's hooked to the microcontroller, and the microcontroller is programmed to start the 5-minute color sequence over from the beginning. So it starts with red, then green, then blue, and then 5 minutes of colors. So if I take a remote control, such as a TV on, and aim, am I not working? Oh. So much for that. How about this one? There we go. They all turn red and then green and then blue. Huh. Infrared is bouncing everywhere. There we go. But the main reason that I did that was so you can get waves of colors, because I have an infrared emitter here that will bounce off my hand and into the detector. So I can make each one turn red, and then green, and then blue. This is making life difficult. There we go. So you can get these waves of colors, and what I'm working on now is a wall-size version of this that I'm talking with the subway people in San Francisco to make a wall in a subway station. So what was normally a bleak, dark place will be waves of colors as people walk by. And they don't know it yet, but they're going to pay me really well for this. So, and they should, because it's cool. Yeah, so I think that'd be a really cool way to make money. Yeah, so you can see that starting with this, you can end up with very different kind of things, which is basically the same hardware, but just a little bit different hardware and then change the firmware, and you end up with something totally different. That one on the bottom, I don't have the example here, but if you make a microcontroller pin go high and low, that can turn a light on and off. In software geek land, that's called Hello World. For software geeks, if you can make Hello World appear on your screen, then you can do just about anything. With microcontrollers, if you can make a LED blink on and off, then you can do just about anything. So, like with the Brain Machine, if you make a speaker pulse on and off that makes sound, with this thing, that tail is hooked to a motor, and if that's hooked to a microcontroller pin. When the microcontroller pin goes high and low, it makes the tail spin on and off. And as the tail spins, it's off balance, which makes it vibrate on its pipe cleaner legs, and it moves forward through vibration. That's called a vibrobot in robot land. And he's also got a little speaker on him, and there's a solar panel. That part just above my finger there is a solar panel. So when he sees light, he eats it, and he gets really happy when he eats it, which makes him sing and dance. And the lights in his antennae blink back and forth excitedly. He's an excitable critter. So that's a solar bug bot. Again, same hardware, a little bit different, and it ends up being something totally different than the original, which is just something that displays, you know, as cool as it is, you can make other cool things. And that's what hacking is all about for me, is taking something that you think is cool or not, and then attempting to make something you think is cooler. Sometimes totally different, sometimes a little bit different. Yeah, so let's go to the next slide. I also made this out of the mini POV, which is an LED cube. And I got the idea from this from a group of Germans who call themselves Der Blinken Lights. And they do a lot of blinking light projects. And this is just a cube that it's a 3D display, very low resolution. I just love that. So those Der Blinken Lights people have huge ones of these in full color. And I'll just show you one other thing here. This is exactly the same hardware with blue, and I changed the firmware to do Knight Rider Cylon because I thought that was cool. I also hacked my first TVB Gone kit out of this as well. Instead of blinking a red light at a rate to make images, pictures, and words, I took an infrared light, which is what remote controls use, and then changed the intervals to be an off code, and that's what that is. And that weird sticker on the top cover, at first when I made it, it was just a black box. And like with TV Gone, I can go anywhere, I can do anything with this, I can turn TVs off everywhere I go, and no one knows it's me, no one even looks at this. It just looks like so many other things on keychains. With the TV Gone Pro, which is this version, which has 8 emitters and turns off TVs at 150 meters, a football field and a half, rechargeable batteries. This is my favorite one, but no one looks at this. You know, it just looks like sort of an MP3 player, maybe. And but when I went around with a black box, in my country, people love looking for terrorists, and they think terrorists are under their bed. It's really bizarre, but if you go around with this thing with the sticker on it, nobody cares. But with just a black box, everyone stares at you and they wonder if you're a terrorist. So, you know, obviously that sticker doesn't look like anything, but yeah, that's all it took. So that was my first TVB Gone kit. Now the TVB Gone kit, I have one somewhere. I must have put it away. So anyways, TVB Gone kit is a bit more compact and much easier to make. So next slide, please. So I already explained the mini POV. She made it for total beginners to complete successfully, and it's really easy and a really cool kit, and you can program your own messages on there. So next slide. And the brain machine is, as I explained, synchronize your brain to brainwave frequencies, which I recorded off the web of a yogi master meditating for 14 minutes. And I simplified it for this particular project. The fancy word in medical academia land for brainwave research, they call it, rather than call it synchronized, they call it entrainment. So next slide. When I was in an undergrad, I was always fascinated, and still am, with concept of mind. What is mind? Do we actually have one, or do we just think we have one? Where is it? What is it? But there's no answers to any of those questions. We're trying to use brains to figure out brains. We'll never figure that out. It's not possible, but it's fun to try. So there's a lot of people doing brainwave research, and I took a lot of classes as an undergrad in physiological psych, and I was guinea pig for a lot of brainwave experiments. Back then, they had to glue electrodes to your scalp. It was really messy, but it was really fun. And I noticed that since I'd been meditating all my life, I could control which brainwaves I output from my brain pretty easily, much to the dismay of the researchers, because it got in the way of what they were trying to do, because I was doing it for what I wanted to do. But anyways, there's a full spectrum of electromagnetic radiation that comes out of every human's or any animal's brain, anywhere from 0 pulses per second up to about 100. And depending on your state of mind, you can measure someone's brain waves and be able to tell what state of mind they're in. You can't tell what they're thinking or how they're feeling, but you can tell if someone's awake, if someone is excited or anxious, or if they're asleep, or if they're meditating by looking at their brain waves. And somewhat arbitrarily, the brain waves are divided up in 5 bands. Kind of like on your car radio, there's an AM band and an FM band. Those are different frequency bands. So these happen to all be contiguous from the lowest frequency, which is delta, up through the highest frequency that we're concerned with here, which is beta. There's actually higher frequencies called gamma, and I don't use those because they tend to make people very anxious. And I want to have people feel good and relaxed, so I don't use those. So, but beta is what we're most people, unless you're autistic, when you're awake, you're just emitting beta waves in those frequencies. As you're sort of drifting off, daydreaming or going to sleep, beta starts going down and alpha starts coming up, and those are the brainwaves that come out when you're kind of spacey. And then theta is like deep sleep. If there's nothing but theta, then you're just in deep sleep without dreaming. And delta happens in a bunch of different states, like if you're coming into dreaming sleep, and also when you're meditating, and also when you're having an aha moment, like, oh my God, I've just figured it out. So it's associated with certain types of creativity. These are vague generalities, but that's sort of the way they work. So next slide. So to go from awake to meditation, the brainwave spectrum goes through a very particular sequence. And even though each of our brains is unique, there's a lot of very subtle differences. The overall pattern going from awake to meditation is the same for everybody. Beta starts going down as alpha starts going up, and then theta starts coming up, which is normally not active at all while we're awake. And theta is sort of more associated with subconscious and deep unconscious thought. But when you're meditating, there's more subconscious, more unconscious stuff happening while we're still conscious, which is beta. So beta is way down, and theta and alpha are up, so you're kind of like in a deep trance state. And that's the state of meditation. And we all do that, even if you don't think you've ever meditated before, you have, because we've all daydreamed. And daydreaming is a light meditative state. And if you play around with that, you can get more and more deep meditative state, and maybe some thoughts that would have remained subconscious can bubble up and you'll remember them a little bit because you have some beta happening and you can remember it in sort of the same way you can sometimes remember a dream. So that's basically a hand-waving overview of meditation. So with the brain machine, I go what that sequence I just described and then hang out there for a little while and then reverse the process to be just in beta again, where you're awake and then feeling fabulous, hopefully. Okay, so next slide. So this stuff it has been around for a while. When people have been dancing around fires, and maybe some of you have even tried that, if you haven't, do it, it's a lot of fun. When people are dancing around a fire, there's a lot of alpha wave frequencies on the drums. And that's part of what puts us into a trance when we do that and makes time just timeless. And people have been doing that for 3 million years and probably will continue to if we turn our TVs off. So, and then more recently, but still a long time ago, this Ptolemy person wrote, he's the first one on record to write about brainwave frequencies. He didn't really know they were brainwave frequencies, at least that's how we model it now, but he noticed that when he's in a horse-drawn carriage going through a bunch of a tree-lined road with the sun beaming in, that the sun was pulsing, and if he closed his eyes, he hallucinated really beautiful colors and patterns. And he liked it. So, next slide. Thanks. In the 1920s is the first time that people actually measured brain waves. This guy in the UK, Hans Berger, was the first one to invent the electroencephalograph, EEG. And you've probably seen these on old Hollywood movies where there's a little pen doing this as a piece of paper moves by and you see a graph of brain waves. And almost as soon as people were measuring brain waves, we were measuring human brain waves. And as soon as this guy, W. Gray Walter, did that, he thought, what would happen if you blink a strobe light at a brainwave frequency? And he found that 70% of people will synchronize to that brainwave frequency. And the brainwave frequency, the only one that he knew of at the time was alpha waves. And he called it alpha because it's the first one that they discovered. Beta came next, even though that was a higher frequency than alpha, and then third came delta and then theta. So, but they're not in order of frequency, they're in order of discovery, chronological order of discovery. So, next slide. In the 1950s, there was this guy, Brian Geisen, who is friends of all of these famous beat people. He was friends with William S. Burroughs and Allen Ginsberg and Jack Kerouac and all these guys as they were exploring ways of breaking free from the stultifying 1950s, where everyone had to be the same and everyone had to do whatever they had to do with very rigid gender roles, etc. And Brian Geisen thought, wow, this brainwave stuff is pretty cool. What would happen if we created a machine to make these brainwave frequencies so anyone can hallucinate whenever they want to without drugs, or with drugs? And so he came up with a dream machine, and that's one that a friend of mine made. Brian Geisen, in the 50s, he took a cylinder of cardboard with slits cut out in just such a way so that when it rotated around on a 78 RPM record player with a light hanging in the middle, that it would strobe out light at alpha waves. And if you sat there with your eyes closed, like these people have to be doing, they hallucinate beautiful colors and patterns. So that's Brian Geisen's dream machine, and a lot of people like that. When I was researching the brain machine stuff, let me back up a sec. I came up with the idea for the brain machine while I was just lying in my room meditating. And it just flashed in my mind that what would happen if you played brainwave frequencies into someone, and I didn't want to do it through electrodes because that seemed a little bit invasive. So I thought to do it with light and sound. And when I went to research, I found out that people have been doing this for decades. So that's part of the thing when, if you're an inventor and you come up with the coolest idea, someone's already thought of it. That always is the case. The only time that's never happened, the only time that hasn't been the case for me was TV Be Gone. And I don't know why someone didn't think of this before, it's so obvious. Anyways, while I was researching that, I found that Kurt Cobain was using the Dream Machine a lot, and a lot of his fans blame the Dream Machine on him committing suicide. But then these other people were saying, no, it wasn't the Dream Machine, it was Courtney that killed him, and it was all a conspiracy. So I think he was just depressed. Yeah, so anyways, in the 70s, people started creating things to hallucinate with other brainwave frequencies and to do it with and without drugs. And they actually started using at discos brainwave frequencies on the strobes and the colored lights until some people with epilepsy started having seizures, and then they stopped doing it. Because this can, for some percentage of people who have epilepsy, it can induce a seizure. So it's not a good thing. Blinking lights and people with epilepsy aren't a good match. So next slide. Yeah, so yeah, in the 80s and 90s, people have been starting to use this for therapeutic purposes. People with severe ADHD, for real, not the fad kind of diagnosis, their brainwave frequencies when they're normally awake have a lot of different frequencies and not just beta. So the idea, if using this technology, can maybe help people chill a little bit by bringing their brainwave frequencies up to just beta and not the others. And people who are autistic have a lot of theta when they're awake, whereas most people don't. So people who are autistic who like this can try to, over a period of several weeks, slowly bring the brainwave frequencies up so it's just beta while they're awake. And maybe they can be part of consensus reality without freaking out so much. There's been some positive results in all this. So there's other people like this Hutchinson guy and the Monroe Institute. If you look online, they make all sorts of outrageous claims. And I won't say that they're not true, but you know, there's likelihood. But anyways, like anything else on the internet, take it with a grain of salt. Next slide. So I wrote this article in Make Magazine. It was my first article, and like I said, it was really popular, and a lot of people have made it. It's a lot of fun. If you want to try it after the talk here, feel free. Next slide. These things are really popular everywhere I go. They're very photogenic. Little kids totally go gaga over them. If you have only one and there's more than one kid, fights ensue. Yeah, so most of those were at Chaos Congress, and these were at a cafe I was at, and a couple parties I was at. So next slide. Yeah, so it's really easy to make, and all the steps are outlined for free on the article you can download online. Next slide. And this, I was going to show you about binaural beats. To get brainwave frequencies with light, all you have to do is pulse the lights on and off at the brainwave frequency. But to get it with sound, you have to use a trick because the sound is too low for us to hear. And so we use something called binaural beat. One ear has one frequency steady, always at 200 hertz. The other ear shifts up and down. And bizarrely, nobody knows why, you perceive both pitches, the steady beat here and the shifting one here, plus you also perceive the difference in frequencies. I don't know if we can, I don't know if you can hear this. Let me just try it and see. There's a physical phenomenon called beat frequency. Let's see if, let's turn this up all the way. Let's see if we can hear this. Hear that? So that's the bass tone. And here's an offset tone that's in your other ear. See, it's a little bit higher frequency. And then over here, I first play the tone, then the alpha tone, and then both together. And you'll hear both frequencies, plus you'll hear a wah 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 wah, which is the difference, which is the alpha frequency. Bass, alpha, both. So you hear that wah 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 wah. So that's a beat frequency, which is a physical phenomenon. Sound pressure waves are reaching your eardrum, which is make your eardrum, are at different frequencies, so they add and subtract at the rate of the difference of the tones. But if you play one pitch in one ear and another pitch in the other ear, there's no physical phenomenon to create beat frequencies, and yet we still perceive the beat frequencies. Nobody knows why, but it's kind of cool. So the next slide, actually the next slide after that too. So the beat frequency is only in your head. And so it's actually quite good for synchronizing your brain to the brainwave frequency because your brain is actively involved with creating that frequency. And here's a rough sketch that I drew up for the Make Magazine article that they took and made into a beautiful diagram. The art department at Make Magazine is really great to work with. But this shows basically the whole thing. So it runs on some batteries, the circuit board's on one side, the lights are in front, sound with your ears, and you can program it with a serial port to do the meditation or brainwave frequency of your choice. And then the graphics on the front are incredibly important because presentation is. It wouldn't be as trippy without them. So next slide. Yeah, so the firmware for this is actually quite simple. I've just start one ear going at one brainwave frequency, and then I go through a table. Here's an example of two entries in a brainwave table, B for beta, and A for alpha is the next one. Divide by 10,000 to get seconds. That's just the way the math worked for the timer in the microcontroller. So this little table here plays beta for 60 seconds and then alpha for 10 seconds. And we could have a sequence as long as we like that way. And like I said, the sequence that I have in the article and that comes with the kit is a 14-minute meditation sequence. But a lot of people have experimented with making really long sequences, or really short ones, or ones to help you sleep, or ones to try to trip out more. And it's all on the blog page for the project on the Make Magazine website. So yeah, so pretty simple firmware. And that's the hardware. That might look kind of scary for people who aren't hardware geeks, but that big block in the middle is just a microcontroller. I'm using 4 outputs, 2 for each LED, 2 for each speaker, and the stuff on the top is for programming the microcontroller using a serial port. And people have worked that out years ago. I just copied it. And that's also in the mini PGB kit. So anyways, if you sort of just whip through these others. The next slide is, you'll see it looks almost exactly the same. That's the mini POV schematic. Go back to the previous one. It's not very different, is it? You can go back to mini POV. So, yeah, and if people are interested in this, I can explain more afterwards about these things. But for now, that's enough here. So the next one is another schematic for a different project. Next slide. The trippy RGB is again almost exactly the same, just red, green, and blue. And then the next one, that's the bug bot. You know, these things, you don't change much and you change the firmware and it's a different project. So, okay, next slide. Oh, that's the TV gone. And there's the TV gone kit. That's what it looks like. I had one here, but it's disappeared somewhere. So, yeah. I think that's it for these slides. Is that right? Is there more? Yeah, that's the website for how to build your own. And all my projects are on cornfieldelectronics.com on the Maker Faire tab. And many of them are hacked from mini POV, and that's on the Lady Yada site where that project is listed, all open source. And next one.
Let me show you what this looks like when you put it on. There's the glasses, and here's the headphones. And let's turn it on. So there you go. That's what you'll hear in Volume 10. Go ahead and get it, get the parts, make it on up, and have a great weekend.
For Make Magazine, and that was an early one that he did with the Brain Machine like 3 years ago now. And that's available online for free. Next slide. So yeah, it's just some other stuff you can read if you're interested. A lot of interesting stuff that people have written, and like I said, there's a lot of fantastic claims, so be aware. And but there's a lot of cool stuff about it too. So that's pretty much it. So the next one I think is just my contact info. Yeah, so we can do Q&A if anyone has any questions about anything. Why don't you go to the contact page, next slide. Yeah, thanks. So, yeah, so any questions about anything? How to quit your job, hackerspaces, how to do cool things, Brain Machine, what? Yeah.
What's going to be your next project?
My next project? I'm working on way too many things at once. You know, my biggest problem now is not that I'm not exploring what I love in my life, is that I know I have way too many things that I would love to do than time to do it. I don't know how anyone gets anything done if they have a full-time job. It's just crazy. And if they watch TV on top of that, there's no way I could do what I do if I wasted any time doing that. So I'm writing a book now, way too slowly, about how to make cool things with microcontrollers, based on the workshop and all these projects. And I'm also working on the Brain Machine is actually a very simplified version of a project I've been working on for years, which is almost ready for real prototype now and ready for manufacture soon after that, which is a very comfortable wraparound fabric mask that uses the same kind of blinky light and sound technology, except very complex waveforms. And much smoother lights that are much dimmer and much more, the whole thing is way comfortable. This is pretty harsh, but it works. I'm amazed how well it works. But the sleep mask that I'm working on now is intended to help people sleep. So a lot of people on our planet have trouble sleeping. And it's obvious to me why a lot of people have trouble sleeping. You know, we wake up, we have all this stuff to do. Most of us hate our jobs or don't like our jobs, so we begrudgingly get out of bed, go to our job that we don't particularly like, drink a bunch of caffeine so we can be awake enough for it, and then do our job. We come home exhausted. We don't have a chance to even chill or self-reflect because we turn on a fucking TV to distract ourselves so that we don't have a chance to see what we think and feel. And then we're finally put our head down to bed, and it's just a mile a minute of all this stuff going through our brains. And maybe we had to drink a bunch of alcohol just to get tired enough so we could just chill out enough to go to bed. And then we wake up having to recover from not enough sleep and have to recover from even a little bit of alcohol. And we wake up groggy the next day to repeat the whole process. That's an option. There are others. But many people find it very, very difficult after years of doing whatever pattern it is for them of not being able to sleep well, and they take sleeping pills in order to sleep. And sleeping pills work, and it's better to be able to sleep even with the drugs and not be able to sleep so you can at least live your life. But when you wake up, you have to recover from not only all that other stuff, but the drugs besides. And there's a lot of side effects that these drugs have. So I would love it if people found other ways to do it, and hopefully the sleep mask is a fun way to try to break those cycles without using all the drugs. Of course, in order to do that legally in the United States, I've got to do about 5 years and $50 million of FDA, Federal Drug Administration trials and tests, and I don't have that amount of money. So I will not make any medical claims. My sleep mask can't be called a sleep mask. I'll call it a rest mask or something. And you know, maybe you'll find it restful. And maybe it'll help you find alternative cool things in your life, and maybe not. It's up to you. So, and that's totally legal to do according to the FDA. And I can say these statements have not been certified by the FDA. So that's another project I'm working on. And I'm working on a new version of pgb20100914 to have a handful more codes to get the handful more huge-ass TVs that have appeared over the last year, and hopefully turn everyone off that I ever see in my life. And yeah, what else am I working on? Yeah, doing lots of workshops and traveling all over the world and helping hackerspaces start. Any other questions? Yeah?
Have you seen those new game controllers that try to control games by your mind? Like the Oculus, and have you thought about combining them with the brain machine as a feedback? Tool? So you can read if the meditation state was successful and change the sequence.
Yeah, so did everyone hear that? So there are all these sort of games that are out there now. There are ways of recording brainwaves now that are much cheaper than they used to be. In order to record brainwaves back in the 1920s, you needed an incredibly expensive machine, the EEG. And EEGs have become much more sophisticated and less expensive, but they're still medical equipment, and they cost like $20,000 or $10,000. But over the last few years, a bunch of people have come up with ways of measuring brain waves that are very cheap, like a couple $100s or way less. There's even an open EEG project, open source EEG, that aren't medically certified, but they really work well. But in the last 3 years, there have been companies that have created these devices to measure brain waves, and the best way they know how to sell them is as game controllers, because that's where the money is. So they're using these for input for making a cursor go left and right or up and down on a screen, or for making a character jump up and down or shoot or whatever. And they're also this one, I can't remember what it's called, but it makes a ping pong ball go up and down with your brain waves. So if you have more alpha waves, the ping pong ball goes up. And if you have less alpha waves, it goes down. So he's asking if we could combine the brain machine with something like that. And it does work. There are people who have tried correlating with the brain machine as it goes through its different brainwave frequencies, measuring the brainwave frequencies coming out of the brain to see if it correlates, and it does, at least with beta and alpha. It's harder to synchronize with delta and theta. So if you do that, as you go into alpha, the ping pong ball will go up. And as you go out of alpha, the ping pong ball goes down. So you could pre-program a ping pong ball sequence on a brain machine. I'm not sure what good it is, but it might be fun. Anyone else? Cool. So feel free to contact me with any questions about anything, anytime. I answer all my emails and phone calls. So I'm always wanting to help people with their projects any way they can. If you have a project that you might want to get manufactured, I have a lot of contacts for manufacturing people in China that I like. In China, some places are really awful black hole pits of despair for their employees, and many aren't. I went to China and researched the ones I use to make TVP Gone, and they treat their people well, and I can recommend them to people who, if you ever happen to have a project you might want to manufacture, or you want to sell something, or you're not sure of your project, I can help with that too. I'm always glad to help any way I can. And I always want to help people start new hackerspaces. So if you have anything about that, please contact me about that. Okay, cool. So go out and do cool things.